what you want. I think it could be something different, another approach to a stupid idea. At the start of starting over, I found myself another way around to stay here. And I keep watching, you keep screaming, if it gets us closer to the meaning of it all. Like sand, I know, slipping right through my hands, needle at the scratch again. You better look out, child, you're bringing me down. It's all over except for the screaming. You keep looking straight through the reasoning. Are you what I want? Are you what I settle for? Is this what I want? Is this what I fell into? And I don't understand why they do these things, and it can never be worth the pain. It breaks like sand, you know you are. Slipping right through our hands, needle at the scratch again. You better look out, child, you're bringing me down. It's all over except for the screaming. You keep looking straight through the reason. Slipping right through my hand, needle at the scratch again. You better look out, child, you're bringing me down. It's all over except for the screaming. You keep looking straight through the reason. Slipping right through my hands, needle at the scratch again. You better look out, child, you're bringing me down. It's all over except for the screaming. You keep looking straight through the reasoning.
Hey guys, welcome back to another great episode of Eggs. Today on the show we have a friend of mine from a long time ago. I haven't talked to him in probably 10, 12 years. His name is Ryan Speer. He's a guitar player in a band we used to work with called Mink Rebellion. He also played in a band called Good with Grenades, and he's just an all-around good dude and a funny guy. So welcome to the show, Ryan. How you doing, buddy?
Good. Hey, first of all, I wouldn't go so far as saying I'm a good dude, but I appreciate the rest of the intro, man. It's been a while.
I'm just trying to start off on a good foot, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, we were talking.
And Mike, while we have the history here, Mike, I think we should maybe start by addressing the elephant in the room. Maybe one of us doesn't have a name that is quite as good as the other two on the call, perhaps.
I can't change my name. Mike Smith is the worst, the most generic name in the world. Actually,
It's true. His name being Mike Smith probably is the punishment in itself. You know, I mean, he's getting what he deserves.
That's funny. Well, how you been, man? I haven't talked to you in a long time. I didn't even know you were in Good with Grenades, and I liked the band, so that's kind of sad, actually.
Yeah, it was funny prepping for this. You know, I've just been kind of talking to some of the old guys from the Mink days recently. Paul Phoenix, him and I, is the bass player for Mink Rebellion, still one of my best friends to this day. And
he's a great
we were talking
guy.
about you. Yeah, but he just got this crazy laugh where he kind of sounds like a dolphin when he starts getting into it. Like, but it's like he sometimes can't make out what he's saying when he gets excited, but he's definitely a good dude. But we were talking and we were trying to figure out around the time frame of kind of when you came into the picture. And like, there was no defining moment of like, hey, here's how we met Mike and here's how the crew came. You just like appeared like this fairy godfather. And then you came into our world and you helped us out with so much content and just kind of directing and managing a little bit of the project. And then also one day you just disappeared. So we don't really know what happened or how it all transpired in the end, but I know there's a lot of good stories in the in-between.
Yeah, I kind of disappeared for personal reasons. I was going through a hard time, and I kind of just needed a whole new start, so I took off. But I should have been better about staying in touch, and I'm sorry about that.
Hey man, the world has a way of finding people back, so here we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So, I mean, you don't, Ryan, you and I have met actually probably several times. I was not as commonly in the picture as Mike was back in those days, but I did come down pretty regularly, maybe once or twice a month. And you guys, Mink Rebellion at the time, were one of my favorite bands of sort of the group of bands that we worked with. So it's actually been kind of an interesting year. We were able to reconnect with some other local Phoenix bands from that era earlier this year, and so it's been a lot of fun catching up and going back and re-listening to the old music and stuff. So really grateful to have you on the show.
Yeah, man, excited. This is fun for me because, a lot has transpired over time. I've been through different projects of different levels of success since those days. But I think Mink Rebellion era, just in general, I mean, for one, not to expose my age out there, but I was in my early 20s about 15 years ago. So, it's just a lot more fun to be had, a lot of great stories with those guys. So just having this opportunity to kind of speak through, it's been a while, so I know we'll get into some goodies here.
Yeah, I honestly, I think I met you through David. He seemed to be the guy because I worked with him on another band called Black Box Burning as well. And I think he was kind of the way I got my foot in the door with you guys. Do you remember the True Underground Music Series with Vaden? I think you guys
of course.
You played on a few of those shows. That's kind of where I kind of met David, and it just kind of evolved from there. So yeah. Anyways, let's get into it, man. Let's talk about the early days of Mink Rebellion, how the band formed,
Well, and maybe it makes sense, Mike, for you to sort of lead off a little bit with your story, just sort of give some context. So back in those days, Mike and I were doing a little concert promotion stuff. Mike was sort of the lead on that, and then I would fly down every now and then. In fact, our company was called Azid Entertainment, AZID, because Mike was in Arizona and I was in Idaho, so AZID. And so I was flying down pretty regularly, and Mike had kind of this whole thing going on down in Phoenix, and Mink Rebellion was, one of many bands that he was working with down there.
Yeah. I don't know. I got down there, and there was this group called Scary Kids Scaring Kids, and my cousin was really into them, and I had never actually really been to a concert before. I had been to two before that. One was Jimmy Eat World, and I can't even remember the other one. Oh, the other one was Cottonmouth Kings with you, Ryan.
Yeah.
So that was like my right. So picture Mormon guy going down to Arizona, never seen music and being a part of the scene, getting introduced to Cottonmouth Kings, Jimmy Eat World, Scary Kids Scaring Kids. And
that's a pretty broad range of musical talent too, by the way. I mean,
right?
Cottonmouth Kings is kind of an odd duck in a world of sort of the screamos and the emos, and then you've got your Jimmy Eat Worlds that are a little more mainstream and pop, and that's a weird collection of bands.
Yeah, and so that's kind of how, like, within the space of like 4 months, I went from never seeing a concert before to wanting to live in this world. And I pretty much, at the show with Scary Kids Scaring Kids, I reached out to the guys at Vaden and said, hey, man, I want to do this. What do I need to do? And they started working with me to put together the True Underground Music Series. And we did that for probably a year and a half, 2 years. And that's how I met Mink Rebellion, Thousand Yard Stare, all those guys that played on those shows. But that's enough about me. Let's get back onto Mink Rebellion, how you guys got formed, and give us the backstory on you guys.
First of all, I owe about a decade and a half worth of gratitude to Ryan right there for saying Azid Entertainment, because forever, like, that logo, it was on a video that we had live, and we never knew, was it Azid? Was it AZID? We never knew how to pronounce it. So that just cleared up about a decade and a half of just chaos in my head.
I'm glad to help.
This
this is a service show. We actually do that kind of thing.
Much appreciated. But yeah, the history is kind of crazy. So I grew up in Detroit, and one day I said, wait a minute, why am I in Detroit? And it was just kind of, at the time there wasn't a lot going on. If you lived in a spot like Detroit, Michigan, it was like you're a very blue collar worker, you're in the auto industry, and you're just grinding away at life, probably getting married like right out of high school, and just, kind of settling in from the gates. And that just sort of was never my path. I always kind of had the saying, like, there's just no way that my dream band, my dream girl also happens, to live with a 5-mile radius. I had some mutual friends, really good close friends of mine that lived in Arizona. Phoenix was supposed to be a stepping stone for me out to Los Angeles, just kind of as a place to sort of stop, just meet some people, kind of network in the area, and then move along. But what happened is I got a great opportunity. Mike, I'm sure you guys probably remember Nancy Stevens.
Oh, yeah.
She was the operations director for the Edge 1039 back in the day. Still a good friend of mine. She actually opened a cool venue right near my house in Scottsdale. But Nancy was sort of like this person. If at that time, if you wanted to be in a band based out of anywhere in like the Tempe, Greater Phoenix area, you had to know this woman. And so I came out there and I met Paul, the bass player of Mink, through one of my friends named Keith out in Phoenix. And Paul was in the band called Trick Turner at the time. I'm not sure if you guys recall that band from the early 2000s in Arizona. They had a song, I think it was called Friends and Family was the single, but they were just, them, Authority Zero were kind of taking over the reins of the Phoenix scene at the time. And Paul was not the original bass player, but he was the current player at that time when they were looking to sort of rebrand their group. They had a record out through RCA, kind of went by the wayside. They had some, minimal success, and then they wanted to sort of reband. And then Paul had brought me into that group. Him and I clicked. At the time, we just kind of, we weren't feeling respect to those guys. We just weren't really feeling that scene of music. We were just trying to do something a little bit more, pop oriented, kind of, as you mentioned, like bands like Jimmy Eat World, at the time, The Format, who now transitioned to the band Fun, a couple of those guys. Those were the guys that we sort of fell in line with. We were a lot more like into like melodies and stuff like that. So Paul had met Bobby, the singer of Mink Rebellion, through a producer in town named Ken Mary, who actually worked with Trick Turner a little bit. And this guy, Ken Mary, was like, hey, you guys, I got this guy named Bobby. He is going to be a star. He is just everything you want in a singer, a songwriter, a bandmate, a friend, everything. We're like, oh, bring it. We've been looking for something different. So Paul started working with him. I think Bobby, I can't remember the name of his project that he was working with at the time, but it just was one of those things, where like he had a project going, we had a project going, but just on both ends, it really wasn't the right mix. So, we got into a room together. We just had an instant bond. The three of us, Bobby, Paul, and myself, I think we're always sort of like, the core guys. Love David Hubbard. That kid was a couple of years younger than us and just a lot more energy at the time. And then Brian, the other guitar.
He was so.
Yeah, and actually,
sorry, this delay is weird. I won't interrupt anymore.
By all means, please. I ramble on.
No, it's fine. I was just going to say that David was your group, your band was just such a fun group of guys to hang out with. You guys were just so funny and weird and strange, and it was just a whole like eye-opening thing of like what a band and what like working together in a group like that is. It was really cool. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and like I said, we're open to everything on this call, and I'll start with one of the good stories about my dear friend David Hubbard. Was that guy? Him and I sort of were the guys after the show that were always looking for trouble, and by trouble I meant girls and whatever we can get our hands on or into at that period of time. And Dave would always have these cool parties. We go back to his apartment at the time, and we'd have girls that we met through shows, whatever. We bring him back to the house. And he would always just preface it like, this is going to be insane. We have bottles of Cristal. We have this, and this. Just always painted this like glamorous picture. So the truth in that was there was a bottle of Cristal. But what he didn't tell the people was he was buying like grocery store champagne and like dumping it into the Cristal and then basically recycling that same bottle at every party he ever had just to sort of, put on that image. So David, if you hear this, man, I love you, but I mean, it worked. To his credit, it worked. That's my boy, David.
That's great. So you guys kind of started forming. What year did you kind of like kick it off? When was your first show?
I want to say the first show was either sometime at the end of 2003 or early on in 2004. That's sort of when we took over the sound and we started collaborating. Bobby had come to the project with pretty much an album of songs that he had written, which, you know, he was a big fan of a lot of like the OG Arizona bands like Gin Blossoms and stuff that kind of like paved the way for bands like Jimmy Eat World and all that to kind of have a voice in Phoenix, this small little desert town. And while we love those guys, it's funny, Robin from the Gin Blossoms ended up being our guitar tech at a couple like stadium shows we played with radio festivals there in town. But Bobby's material at the time just kind of sounded a little bit dated. It was all very good, great structure, great songwriting, but just kind of had more of like that 90s rock feel. And at the time, I mean, it was just, there was so much happening in the world of music. I think bands like, you know, Brand New were coming out on the scene. The Used, all those types of bands, like this whole new energy of younger bands were coming through, and just kind of realized we wanted to take a little bit of like Bobby's old school methodology and then just kind of modernize it and kind of, you know, again, fitting more into the bands like The Format and Jimmy Eat World who were coming up at that time as well.
Yeah, that was such a great time frame for music. It was everywhere. Because not only was, you know, Screamo kind of getting into place, the Brand News, the Scary Kids were from there. You had bands like Vaden, You Guys, Authority Zero, Jimmy Eat World. The Format was one of my favorite bands of all time. I mean, it was such a good time for music and a good place to be. And this is like deja vu just thinking about it. So.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think, man, there's a lot of these bands. If you look at, you know, The Format, you had Nate go on to create Fun, which became like this massive, massive band with like insane, like sing-along national releases. I think those guys were from New York and sort of migrated to Arizona for a while, but once they disbanded, they became this huge thing. If you remember, do you remember the Cover Up guys in town?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so the Cover Up, it's crazy. So those guys, it was kind of like a friendly competition, whereas like those guys, if their music and our music were people, like their music could beat the shit out of us. Like it was just way more aggressive and way more like anger. Like they kind of appeased towards like the metal and hardcore crowds, where we appeased to the ladies, I guess, you know, more like the melodic, which we were cool with that. But those dudes, super hardworking dudes, and they went through a couple different bands later on. I think they're in a band called Man Made Machine after the Cover Up, and then Joe Catella, the singer, that such a good dude. They formed a band called Dead, DED, which right now, like, they're blown up as we speak. They were on tour with Korn last year. They got some videos directed from Fred Durst, just doing a lot of big things. So it's kind of cool seeing a lot of those bands and people from that era in general just kind of seeing success this many years later.
Yeah, it's so weird to kind of just, you know, I got in touch with you and Vaden and those guys, and it's interesting to see them. Not necessarily, like, a few of the guys aren't in music anymore. A few of them are just kind of doing their own thing. I think Curtis from that band is down in San Diego, and he's giving horse tours. So it's completely different world, but it's fun to see, like, you know, guys like you still kind of going hard and doing it. So.
That's crazy, man. I think Vaden, as I remember, what were they? Simplify? Was that their name prior to Vaden?
Yeah, Simplify, spelled weird, like SIMPL.
Yeah,
or something.
All those dudes were just some of the coolest guys. Bruce, their drummer, was awesome. Armin, the guitar player, and Curtis. Curtis is just one of those guys that, like, you just look at him and you know that there's just art flowing within him. I saw like a video that he covered a song. I forget, it's Lost on You by this girl named LP. It's this really cool song.
Dude, LP,
like a modern pop song.
LP,
yeah.
I saw her in Phoenix at, it was some hole in the wall venue. I can't remember what it was, but I just random night. I'm like, oh, they got to have some music playing. And she was on tour and came through, and she blew my mind. Like on a Tuesday night, just one of the best shows I've ever seen. If you get a chance to see her perform at all, LP is amazing. But,
and what's crazy was, I mean, the first time I ever was exposed to her was actually Curtis from Vaden was singing a cover of that Lost on You song. And I just went into like the rabbit hole of YouTube and I look her up and I'm like, okay, there's no way this like female looking Bob Dylan is going to just sound so amazing. And then you just hear her voice and it was nuts. So it's just one of those little things I love about music. Just, I never would have heard about her if it wasn't from some guy that I played music with, you know, years ago. So it's just kind of cool seeing all that stuff.
Yeah, I saw her
come together that
on.
way.
She like I don't know, a year ago she was on Fallon or something. And I'm like, I've seen her. Holy cow! I honestly thought she was a dude when she was getting ready to go on, and then she started singing, and I'm like, what the fuck? But yeah, so Mink Rebellion comes along. You guys, I worked with you guys probably for I don't know 2 years, maybe 3. The one thing that I remember from working with you guys that stands out the most was Edge Fest. And can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, that show was one of the things, again, kudos Nancy Stevens. She always took care of us. She was sort of operating all the shows, picking all the talent for the local radio fest. And the Edge 103.9 at the time was like the end all be all station for like alternative progressive rock. You really wanted to be a part of that. And so Nancy was picking together the lineup that year and gave us the opportunity. She'd given us opportunity a couple of years in the past, on some of the smaller stages, but finally gave us the opportunity to showcase our talent on the main stage. So, we tried to come at it with a serious approach, partying the night before, just in bed early, up early, exercise, ready to go. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. We connected with some friends. Phoenix TX was another band playing that year. We made really good friends with those guys over the years. They had another kind of like a sister band called Denver Harbor that Nancy was managing at the time, who also their drummer, Alon, is now playing with like Angels and Airwaves. Tom DeLonge from Blink-182. It's insane. Just to continue on the stories of people from that era that have gone on to crazy things. But yeah, and also, yeah, never mind Angels and Airwaves. They're great, but he's also the drummer for Nine Inch Nails, some band that you guys might have heard of over time, which is just nuts. But, we had the opportunity to meet up with those guys, and we shared the same hotel. And then from the same hotel, we sort of condensed rooms. Half the band that didn't want to partake in any after-hours activities went to one room. The other half of the guys, like myself, we just decided to keep it going all night. So this was supposed to be a great opportunity to arrive to Edge Fest the next day well rested. We knew that we had you guys coming, ready to do some footage, shoot a live video for us that day. But to say that we were well rested and at our best that day would be just an extreme exaggeration. But somehow we partied through it. We were all young. Took a party bus over to the show, started drinking that morning, which will play along later on in the Edge Fest story. But we got there, man, and there was something, I don't even know that we were supposed to have you guys there because we were just trying to get like in and out in that main stage. But I mean, we snuck.
You there? You there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you did. You snuck us in your trailer. we had. I got a film crew from a high school that because I didn't know anyone who had film equipment or whatever. So I went to a high school and I asked, hey, do you have a film class that, would like a project? And sure enough, there were 3 or 4 kids in the class that was able to get some cameras, and we stuck them in your trailer, and we just got them up on stage, and they literally stayed. We were able to stay there from your set all the way up until Social Distortion came on. And when Social Distortion was coming on, their crew members came around and started checking for passes. And we didn't have any, but we played it off the whole time like we did. And we went from stage to stage. We got footage of you, Authority Zero, like everyone that was playing that day up until the headliner. It was crazy.
Yeah, we're like wheeling in people, like, usually there's loading in gear out of the trailer, but we're actually wheeling in humans just off the back of the trailer.
Yeah,
but it was good, man. Like, what's crazy is like that video, it was just a fun day for all. Like having you guys come out there. Edge Fest was a good set despite our partying and chaos the night before. In our eyes, we went up there and killed it that day. And like that video still serves like this montage. So at the time, again, not to date us all here because we're all just young gentlemen in our 20s still. Not a lot of people in the crowd had iPhones at the time because it didn't exist yet. So there wasn't a lot of footage just from shows like you see everywhere now, which to some people's argument may be better, maybe worse, just kind of up for debate. But that video that you guys shot for Along for the Ride, it just still to this day is like one of those things you can kind of look back on, kind of like just, a showcase of that day and brings back a lot of those memories.
Yeah, so I forgot that I made the video, to be honest with you. I went up to Seattle, and I had kind of just like, I switched from being a promoter and working with bands. I wanted to be kind of the artist. I wanted to be kind of like in your shoes. So I started working on DJing. And so I kind of got into that, and I kind of just changed my mindset. And then about 10 years later, I kind of, what happened to all the guys in Phoenix? And I just Googled Mink Rebellion, and that video popped up, and I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. So I'm glad we made it, and I'm glad that someone put it on YouTube, because it wasn't me that put it on YouTube.
So yeah, it was one of the girls.
I was just gonna say, isn't it interesting too? Because I think Mike, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of what sort of rekindled all that stuff is, didn't you run into Bruce in Washington somewhere?
Yeah, he
Bruce from Simplify.
So Bruce from Simplify plays in a couple bands. He plays in a tribute band for the Beastie Boys called Brass Monkey, and then he also plays in a country band, Poloco. I can't remember what it's called, but he's playing in like 3 or 4 bands in Seattle, and I just found that out. I'm like, holy shit, Bruce is here. So I went and saw him, and it just kind of kicked this whole ball rolling again. But that video, I have it on a DVD in my DVD collection, because who uses DVDs anymore? But I have it personally, but I didn't know that it was on YouTube, and I didn't know that I gave it out. It must have been a copy that I gave to you guys.
Yeah, you gave it to us because fast forwarding into like a couple months after Edge Fest, I remember that you also helped us produce a CD release show we did with Mink Rebellion for the Along for the Ride EP. And somehow at the time, there was one of the fans, one of the girls that used to come out to all of our shows, like locally in Phoenix. She had got a copy of it, and randomly I saw it one day, and I'm glad I did. Except, I mean, it's crazy looking back on that again. It just showcases the fun. But there's one point to anybody that ever sees the video, is I think it's literally at the 3-minute mark. Whoever edited that, you guys have me like superimposed over the crowd, like it was like a tribute, like I died or something, you know, like clouds in the background, just kind of like this like fading image of me. And I'm like, fuck, man, like I look like I'm dead, but it just puts me like up and over the crowd. I was like, this is, you know, despite that part, you know, it was a great video, and I'm glad that somebody else threw it up there, because if that wasn't living through her on YouTube, I never would have saw it again. And
so I was literally producing the video with the kid at his house, because we took all the footage after the show, and because we got kicked out early, and we couldn't see Social Distortion, so we're like, hey, let's go edit this right now. So we went back to the kid's house, and he was I mean, like, it was probably the first edition of like Final Cut Pro. It was like the cool effect at the time was to overlay stuff and do weird stuff. But the one thing that I remember about that video was, I think it was you or Brian or someone stomped right in front of a speaker, and this cloud of dust came up. And right as he stomped, we timed it to where it was on the downbeat of like the song. So it just kind of worked out perfect. And there was a couple moments like that. I don't know. It was just a really cool experience, and I still tell people about it to this day, because it was a lot of fun.
What's funny about that is, like, I'm glad I get to take credit for that stomp, because I recognize that. Like, it literally right on the beat, it was perfect, that jump and the landing. And so anytime I've ever like showed that over, if I had a nice little tasty babe that I was, you know, entertaining for the evening, I would conveniently have that video up, like paused right before that. And then when I hit play, it just comes in with me looking cool, stomping. That dust comes up from my, that's right. And then she still didn't want to do anything with me. So
that's funny.
Well, so tell me if this makes any sense to you, Ryan. I'm just trying to put things together, and I don't know how this goes chronologically, but I'm trying to lump together old memories too. So in that same period of time, Mike and I were also introduced to the Phoenix TX guys, and Mike, fill in some details if you know where I'm going. But we actually built a website for their Purple Reign of Terror album release when that came out. It was like a live album. And so we built that. But like in that same period of time when that came out, I want to say that maybe you guys had not launched the Along for the Ride EP, but you just had the one album out, and there was something going on where you guys were going out and maybe Bobby and some of the guys were performing in Hollywood or something.
Yeah, that was another fun trip.
Yeah, it's crazy. What was that? Was it?
I want to say that it was. I think
Rain
also
of Blood?
I think through Nancy, I think there was Purple Rain of Blood or something like that. I have to look it up, but I have the poster in the house. But yeah, so in that same period of time, whatever it was, I don't know why I'm associating it with that Phoenix TX album, but I think that Nancy or somebody had set you guys up, maybe with some A&R guys out in Hollywood or something, and you were going out to try and pitch an album or pitch some new music or something.
You guys, I think that's when you
sense?
guys recorded Bump on the Head and the tracks. You were showcasing it in Hollywood at the Roxy, I think.
Yeah, I remember the Roxy was where they played.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty perfect diagram of time there. Because I remember exactly that live album came out for Phoenix TX. And they did a show at the Clubhouse back in the day, which was one of the coolest venues in Arizona that's no longer there thanks to a drive-by shooting that took place one year. But around that time frame, we had just written a ton of new material. We were really kind of clicking on all cylinders. And we had all of the material, which was going to be for the Along for the Ride EP. And like you said, Nancy, who was our manager at the time, credit her to a lot of my cool music experiences. She set up a couple showcases for us in LA. And, that's another testament to Mike. I remember one day, we were stuck. Something was happening. We had a showcase the next day. I don't know that we had enough equipment. I don't know if you were doing lighting or something. We asked an extreme last minute favor of you. Show up to your apartment at the time at 10 o'clock at night, and you're like, yep, we're going. And then I think we couldn't even fit everybody in the van, so you just drove separately, but you brought David Hubbard with you in the car, and then we cruised out to LA. And I want to say that you did something at the show. I think it was the Key Club or the Roxy, one of them in LA. And I feel that you did something at that show for us production-wise.
So I got there and there was a light controller that I had never used before. So for me to go and try and program scenes and lighting and everything for you guys, it wasn't like I could just jump on it and know how to use it. So I actually coached their lighting guy at key moments of your performance. So build up or something. Hey, go mellow with it and then bring it up and ramp up and do a strobe thing or something. I just kind of coached him as to the flow of your set because I couldn't program it and learn the board in a short amount of time. So he ended up running the lights, but I told him how and when and where to do stuff. So that was kind of a fun show because I think that venue had it set up to where you come in and you perform, and at the end of the show you can walk away with a DVD recording of your live set. I don't know if you guys got that or not.
That's literally though, it's the Viper Room, the Rock, anything in LA, which is crazy. It's like Los Angeles, but dude, they monetize anything they can for a band. Hey, come through and play this show. Thankfully, we never had to do the pay to play things. We had great management. We got these shows with for the showcases with all the label people out there. But if you're an up and coming band, it's hey guys, you want to play the Roxy? Cool. Sell 575 tickets at $20 a piece, even though you're an unknown band. Also, as a parting gift, you can buy a live recording from the soundboard for $150 as a memory of your trip. So a lot of those places up on Sunset, they still do that to this day, but it's just more of a, just kind of something. I think it's the sound guys might have a side gig where they just get commissioned to do that or just try to pocket some extra cash or something. But it's a pretty clever idea, but it's just a little bit pricey if you're, an up and coming band trying to make it.
So one of my goals and one of my dreams in life is to open a venue similar to Center Street, or not Center Street, the Clubhouse. It's really sad what went down there with Eugenia and the shooting. She was an amazing person, awesome to work with. But I want to open up a similar capacity size venue, 400 or 500, and do intimate shows and document the show and produce it and put it out on just a YouTube channel or something, and just
the low price of $150 for every artist that wants to come play.
No, just for the content. It's something that I think is amazing. There's a show that does the Audience Network does stuff like that with bands, and I just think it's a really cool format to
Well, and I think an idea like that would be really cool too. I mean, because like one of the things, just speaking of this era of music in Phoenix, I mean, for people listening to this show that may not be familiar with all these bands, I just remember like that being sort of a magical time in Arizona. Like, I mean, there were so many really talented bands, and like, I mean, the reason I was bringing up this show in LA is I mean, it was in that period of time when, like, for me personally, when I began to sort of recognize some of Bobby's skills as a songwriter. I mean, the music he was putting together was just like, I mean, the lyrics and things like that. Like I still remember, like Burning Girl, Hitchhiker, Tsunami, some of these songs that I just loved. And there are these little hooks in them and stuff that are just amazing. And like, I could see that band going somewhere. And there are a lot of bands like that, there are many of them. And so to have a venue like what you're describing, or some sort of way of sharing those magical moments in some music scene in some city, would be really great, because there's something about that time, just chemistry wise, that God, I don't know how you would ever repeat it, but it was these little microcosms of music have to be happening all over the planet, and it would be really cool to catch some of those.
Yeah, it's kind of cool you said that too. A lot of the things were at that time, it was just crazy. Phoenix was, again, prior to that, there wasn't a lot that came out of there. Like I mentioned, like Gin Blossom, stuff like that came up in the 90s. But, every scene kind of has its peaks and valleys, and then it kind of dipped for a little bit. And then right around that time, the early to mid 2000s, it just picked up. I mean, it was insane what was happening. Again, I know I've mentioned Nancy about 70 times throughout this call, but I love her. I mean, she did so many things for us. We were just like an up and coming band, but the song Hitchhiker, I don't know if you guys remember, like back in the day, like the original like iPod or iTunes commercials that kind of had like a color background, but there's like a shadow figure like dancing with like headphones or something. It was like a silhouette just moving around.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the song was like by Jet that ended up making that commercial, but Hitchhiker was actually number 2 or 3 or something in line of the choice to like cut for that. And if that would have happened for us, I mean, that would have been game over, just a game changer for everyone's life.
Well,
but,
and I remember when that single came out, I mean, that is a really strong song. And like for that time, I mean, it totally could have competed. I can't remember that Jet song, but there was that one, and there was like another one by the Fratellis or something that sort of hit about that time. And I think, and that Hitchhiker song could have totally done that. I mean, it's sort of a bummer. And so I guess to circle back to this Hollywood showcase, like I don't recall much happening after that. Like that sort of felt like sort of the end of an era or something. What was the sort of trajectory of the band after sort of that period of time after that showcase?
Yeah, it's a good call out. So basically, now that my mind has been spinning to remember all these instances, I think so that showcase would have actually been after Along for the Ride came out, because that was ironically what was supposed to be like the showcase to be like a game changer and like a new path for us career wise, ended up being like one of the final performances. At the time, like just some of us like to party like crazy, myself definitely being one of them. At that time, that particular showcase, I was good friends. I don't even like saying good friends. The guy, singer of the band Lost Prophets, he had lived in Los Angeles at the time, and they were blowing up. They did a lot of cool things, and that guy was doing a lot to try to like get me exposed with other artists, try to like get me, just networking with Hollywood people, maybe like just go on as like a hired gun guitar player for like a successful band out there. Brought that guy out to the show, and we were building up this audience with like just like modern relevant bands at the time, and just all these label people. And it was just, again, I think we just liked the party too much, and that kind of translated on stage. Like admittedly, like I would be the guy, like we'd be playing a song like Concrete Lake by Mink Rebellion, which was like this very mid-tempo, slow song. But I'd be looking like I'm in fucking Corn or something on stage, like just jumping around like crazy, just because I was just like so in the moment. But at that time, kind of what happened is there was right around that time, forget the guy's name, but there's a guy in the Arizona music scene that started what was a great idea. It was like early on, there's a lot of bands like 311 or like Slipknot. They have like these like rock and roll cruises that, they set out to see. And a guy in Tempe organized like this Arizona cruise where it was like us, Authority Zero, Gin Blossoms, a lot of these bands that just got together to like play these shows at sea. At that point, that was like after the LA showcase, things were just kind of like, what should have been on an upward trajectory, just been on a downward spiral. And we played that show. There was, some, people were sharing girlfriends on the boat. There was substance abuse going on. There was a lot of different things that were happening. And simultaneously, there was a band that was playing called the Black Moods that were coming up at the time in Tempe. And those guys were a little bit more of like a 70s rocker type band, pretty much like Led Zeppelin. And what's crazy was, as we get into the story, Mink Rebellion sort of disbanded because a guy named Josh, the singer of the Black Moods, was just like this infectious guitar player. I mean, super like insane, like crazy, like more talented than I could ever be on the instrument. But just more like into like aged, like dated rock. And so I think him and Bobby at that point, Bobby was about 10 years older than us. I don't know if a lot of people realize that. Sorry to throw you under the bus, but just in context, those two had, Josh was my age, but he was an old soul, and Bobby was a little bit older. So I think they just kind of found a formula that worked sort of in the background. And Mink Rebellion just wasn't doing what they wanted to do. So,
well, and if I remember right, I think that band was that Violet Wild?
Yeah. So basically, once this cruise ended, Josh, Bobby got together, Mink Rebellion disbanded, and then they tried keeping the name of Mink Rebellion for a while, but at the time I was the business guy in the band. I created like the MySpace page, the website, and everything. And as soon as that happened, looking back, would I do it again? Absolutely. Like I changed all the passwords and I shut down like everything just so they couldn't use the name anymore. Cause I just couldn't stand that, something had come to an end. But
yeah,
then I would look at this fucking guy with these long, like just Goldilocks hair, just wanted to be Robert Plant so bad. I was like, I hate this guy. I hate everything about him. I hate what he looks like. I hate the way he plays guitar. I hate the music he writes. And now Josh from Black Moods is one of my best friends in the world 15 years later.
Yeah, no, it was interesting because like some years later, I mean, God, 5 or 10 years later, I saw Violet Wild coming through Idaho Falls, Idaho, of all places, and I ran into them, and I still had Bobby's number or something kicking around from like eternity prior, and just out of the on a whim, out of the blue, hit him up and sent him a text. And I remember what a surreal show it was, because I didn't really know anything about the band. I just knew Bobby and I knew Mink Rebellion, and I was so like I guess kind of jacked up to go see some of the hits. I assumed they might go back and play some old Mink Rebellion stuff, and they did. But they played it with this weird country western flair that just killed it for me. It totally like ruined all these songs that for me were just like iconic. I mean,
you hear that, Josh? You hear that, Josh?
I mean, it's clear the guy is like an amazing musician, everything else, but it was just so for me because I had been there during the Mink Rebellion era. It was so out of left field that I had a really hard time catching it. Some of their original stuff was great and all that was all good, but I remember just being sort of taken aback and going like, "Oh, like bummer. I guess we're done with this." So it was kind of an interesting show or an interesting moment anyway.
Yeah, and I love that you said that because that's just kind of an ongoing joke. I think, basically what happened, as I alluded to, is they tried to keep the Mink Rebellion name in a lot of those songs because they wanted to roll with the momentum. In town, we were one of the biggest bands in PM. We were selling out venues like the Clubhouse, doing a ton of crazy stuff. We started touring a little bit regionally. We had airplay going on. And so when it ended, it was, obvious choice for them to like, let's just keep riding this wave as long as we could. But, I think what happened was that band did not have an.
Hello?
Lost him.
That sucks.
Yeah, his call dropped off. Shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
I'll get a reception that works.
It's Detroit.
I'm telling you, it literally just is poor in this house.
It's all good. Ryan, do you want to re-ask that question as a cutting point?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, what did I say? I think I kind of finished my thought. He was just elaborating on it. So,
I can jump back in.
Yeah, kind of just jump back in where you left off. That'd be great.
Yep. So I'm glad that you said that regarding just sort of the sound of, what you saw at that show with those guys. Because I think what happened was, they as a band did not quite find their identity yet. What happened was basically, once Mink Rebellion disbanded, we left this great platform because we were one of the biggest bands in Phoenix at the time. We were selling out local shows, we were touring regionally, we had songs on the radio, and everything was going well. And it just kind of ended extremely abruptly. So rightfully so, I mean, those guys looked at it as an opportunity. Well, let's just keep riding this wave, as much as we can. And I think what was happening was we built, I mean, just our image in Mink Rebellion, like the way that we were playing the songs. It was, again, Josh is amazing, but it was more like that 70s, like classic rock vibe. And it just wasn't translating well with like the kids, like our audience at the time. And, they recognized that really quick. And they kind of gave up hope on Mink Rebellion as fans. And then as those guys continued on, they were using a lot of the Mink songs as a starting point for them. But as they began writing with one another with By the Wild, they sort of found their voice. And, they became more of like the college level or like, older audience band, just kind of like incorporating a great sound. Still Bobby's same voice, but, Josh and him just kind of needed to sort of put everything in a melting pot together as their unit and just let go of what we did, because there's no way that those guys could pull off what Mink Rebellion did as our core group, and there's no way that we could have ever pulled off what they were trying to do, separately as well. So I think that's kind of just, what ended up happening for them. While it went on for a couple of years, they played a lot of cool shows, and then, ultimately Bobby went through some personal changes in his life, and just kind of, it sucks. It's one of the things I hate the most, because to this day, I mean, him and I would go up north to Flagstaff when we were trying to like write songs, or we'd go down to the studio with Paul. And songs like Along for the Ride just came out for literally a 12-hour party sesh in a studio. And when you hear Bobby just sing, I mean, it pisses me off to say, because I like making fun of the guy as much as possible. I mean, he was one of those guys, like, you strike a chord on the guitar, he hits this note with his fucking angel voice, and goosebumps on your arms. He just had such an immense talent. And, unfortunately or fortunately for him, I'm sure, it's a better road now, but he just kind of disappeared from the music world altogether. And just, that voice is left unsung these days.
Yeah, well, and it's so interesting. I remember at that show I was describing, I can't remember the song. Maybe is it Concrete Lake? It's the Time Is Cut Glass That's Much Easier Shattered. It's that song. We know what that is. Is that Concrete Lake? I think.
Tsunami.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah, that is it. And I remember that was like one of my favorite songs from the self-titled EP that you guys had early on. And I felt like the lyrics were so clever, and the way it sort of worked, it was a great song. And I remember hearing that one in like the country version, and I was just like so bummed. And but I mean, that was the thing. I always had the most, utmost respect for Bobby as a songwriter and stuff. I thought he was pretty incredible. And I remember hearing the story of that album, that second album, just you guys kind of rocking it out in an afternoon. And I was just like, yeah, that sounds about right for him. Yeah. So that is frustrating that, that he ended up going another direction. I mean, I guess it's good for him, but I guess it's how it goes.
So right after I took off to Seattle, and I was up there, I was watching the show on Discovery Channel or something. It was like a junkyard salvage kind of thing. And all of a sudden, Brian shows up, and I'm like, I know that guy. He was in Mink Rebellion. Whatever happened to him? How did he get on that show? And he was just a quiet guy. I never really got to know him that well. Was it Brian? Brian?
That was Brian. Yeah. I'll tread carefully, because if anybody of that era just doesn't connect that well anymore, it's him and I. We kind of had a little bit of a falling out. But I mean, I love the dude. He's fun to play with, fun to hang out with. But he had known one of his buddies. I can't remember. Something happened where he had this friend that got bit by a fucking chihuahua or something like that, and then sued people and made a lot of money. I don't know if that's fact, but it's something with a dog bite. This dude came up on a lot of cash, and he owned some sort of junkyard in the middle of nowhere, way off the 17 in North Phoenix, and they were rolling in some pretty serious cash just from their business that they created from some lawsuit or something that they had that was settled. And then, after Mink sort of disbanded, Brian again also kind of left the scene of music. He was a little bit older than us as well, and I think he was just, he had a wife, kids, and we were just all a bunch of delinquents. So he was looking for different ways, to make things happen. And then whatever network that was, somehow they pitched it. They just, at the time it was they'll make a reality show out of anything possible, and that they did. It was Desert Car Kings or something like. It was just I don't know. The show to me was hey man, I'm glad my man had his time on the screen up there, but it was just But I don't know exactly what transpired, how it came into play, but hey, God bless him for doing it.
I think that was the time that I looked up Mink Rebellion and found the video, was because I saw him on there. I'm like, I know this guy. I worked with that band. Check this out. That's funny. Okay, so you left. Mink Rebellion's kind of done. How long before kind of Good Grenades kind of took off, and how did you get in that world?
It's another great story. There was another band in between Mink Rebellion and Good with Grenades that I joined up in. That it was really, for me, it was not a band I was ever passionate about. They just happened to have like an opening for guitar, and I just didn't want to sit stagnant. So, and more so than anything, I just want to like still prove that like I was the one like bringing in. I was always the one promoting and networking. So I wanted to like just go up against Violet Wild and be like, hey, fuck you guys. Look what I'm still doing. So I joined up with a pop band in town called Rosebud that we played. I was with those guys for maybe like 6 months or something like that. It just wasn't a very good band. Super poppy, but it was not, no one was serious about it. It wasn't really going to go anywhere. And at the time, a girl that I met through that band, she and I, we went back to her house one day just to talk about, the news and the world and stuff like that, and definitely nothing else. And on her dresser, she had this CD from a band called Good with Grenades. There's like a very like early on like demo songs, and she's like, "Yeah, I saw these guys play not too long ago. Why don't you check this out?" And so popped in and heard a couple like the early songs, and I was just something about it. I was like, you know what, this is just cool. I'm gonna try to like hit these guys up and see what's going on with them. And at the time, it turned out there wasn't really much. And I reached out to their drummer, my buddy Yoder, I think was the drummer at the time, and we set up a meeting at like Zen 32 or like Deluxe Burger or something like that in Phoenix. Just one night, I'm like, hey, like let's meet up and talk. I come with skill on the guitar, and I also have like a huge network and the business mind. If you guys have some great songs, I'd like to try to like develop and go with it there. And then had a sit down, and I meet this guy Johnny, who's the singer of the band, and like it was like most people can't stomach being around me, but then if you get like two of me in one room, just like, oh my God, like just nobody, just too many like just terrible jokes and just arguing and just chaos. Like nobody wants to, be around us because we just, whatever. We basically met this and we fell in love. And that was like this extreme bond. Like our friendship was kind of what drove that band. And then, we basically, the band was kind of like defunct at the time. We weren't really doing a lot. And then just came into it, with this just bursting with, enthusiasm. I was ready to like put a project back on the map, and had some good songs, started working with them, collaborating a lot more, and just took, the material and things started kind of blowing up for us. We got an alternative press magazine. We did a bunch of shows with bands like there's a band called Foxy Shazam, The Matches, early on with like Paramore, and just a bunch of bands like that of that era, and we just fitted perfectly with them. And great brotherhood that I had with Johnny there, and things just kind of progressed from there with Good with Grenades.
Yeah, Bruises and Bite Marks. I have that on a playlist I listen to like all the time, and I think I looked on Spotify. It's got like 3 million plays. It's that was a good era of music. The Paramores, the Matches. I lived with a guy who's roommate and drummer dude for about 3-4 months, and he claimed he was in the band The Matches. And I was like, nope. I Googled it and looked it up, and that's how I found The Matches. I just knew it was too clean of music for him to be the drummer. But anyways,
what was
go ahead.
Actually crazy, a little bit of a connection with The Matches is at the time, there's a guy named Mike Green who was out of Berkeley, I think, just this super genius, like music producer guy. And he had produced The Matches, like their first record. And then he also worked with like Paramore, Ja Rule randomly. He produced something like Paris Hilton, a band called Ann Arbor that was also out of Phoenix. And
Ann Arbor's amazing.
He was like, yeah, which is crazy. So like we knew of this guy like through some of his past work. But Mike Green was actually a guy, we got a developmental deal at Good for Grenades through Atlantic Records, and we got to record an EP with him. And it was a fun experience. The guy was he taught us a lot about just production and different things, kind of thinking outside of the box, things we never would have done before. But ironically, Bruises and Bite Marks, we came to the table because we were like, we have this song that's already catching traction. It's been like on local radio. It's been on regional radio. We really want to take this song. So we know it just has not been put out there to the masses yet. Let's take it, make it bigger. And he took the song, and one of the most favorite parts of that song for me is just like this iconic, like gritty, like choppy, like digital, like program guitar part that's on there. It's like the intro riff is just like this gritty, cool, catchy thing. And we loved it. At the time, though, All American Rejects had a song, Move Along, that had just come out. And if you listen to those songs, I guess you can sort of see a similarity in like the sequence or the pattern of like the guitar playing on that. But he just thought that the way we had it with a gritty guitar was way too similar to what those guys had in their song. So we re-recorded it with him, but he used this terrible, terrible synth where it just sounded like this dance song. And I'll have to send you like that version of it somewhere under the table here, because it's just like, if you listen to the two side by side, it was
It's
just,
horrible.
yeah, it's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. And I play guitar on
it. One show I just thought of while you were, I don't know, you said All American Rejects, and then I'm like, that's not the band. Fallout Boys. You guys played as Mink Rebellion at a Fallout Boys show, and you brought me along, and I did photography for it. So I was going back through an old hard drive a while ago, and I found all these pictures of Fallout Boys, and I had forgot I even shot that show. But sorry to bring that up. When you said All American Rejects, it triggered something, and I thought they were the band that you guys opened for. But back to Good with Grenades. How long have you been in that band? Were they formed? They were formed before that. How long had they been around before you jumped in?
I think they were only together for like maybe about like a year or so, give or take. And it was just kind of like, like this, like changing of guards after changing of guards with like the personnel. So another one of those things that like Johnny and I are just these two morons that were destined to meet somehow and put our brains together and do something, with the business side of it and the writing side of it, just putting our minds together and going. And so once him and I connected, I can't remember exactly what happened. I love Matt Yoder, who was like the original drummer of that project when I came into the mix. Something just happened over time where it didn't work out with him. I don't even think it was definitely not a performance thing. I think it was just like, he was kind of sick of like the Johnny and Ryan show, as one of the old band members used to call it. And we ended up grabbing Eddie Bowen, who was the drummer for, God, I forget the name of the band that he was in, but he was another one of the Phoenix local bands. There's a guy named Jeffy in the band. I forget like what the Tim Harmon, like from back in the day, like Hour Zero Records in Phoenix, like had this band out there.
I'm glad you brought his name up, because I completely forgot about him and his photo shoots and his promotion level. He's next level. Like at the time, he was doing some crazy stuff, like hanging people upside down and taking photos to get cover art for, was it Alternative Press, AP Press? Didn't he do a lot of the cover art for that? Yeah.
Yeah. The band was For the Record that Eddie came from. But yeah, Tim Harmon, he shot like Blink-182 for the cover of like Alternative Press. And like, he was this guy, like another kind of staple of that music scene at the time. Like, you don't think about, when you think about the music scene, you think about just like the bands, but you're not thinking of like the Nancys and like the managers and like the radio people. And then you had this guy who was like a photographer that just kind of like helped blend it all together. He gave Phoenix this like distinct look. He had such like a just a style to his work and like his Photoshop and production of these pictures and everything. And in fact, some of the pictures Ryan, that I sent to you, those were from a Tim Harmon shoot back then with Mink Rebellion. So
yeah, no, I remember a lot of his work. I mean, my background's in marketing and design and stuff, so I was always a fan of Tim Harmon. And I know that you guys did a couple shoots with him, and he shot a bunch of those Phoenix bands. Yeah, his work's incredible. Yeah, I mean, it still stands up, and it's great. And like, yeah, people who listen to this show, they'll be able to see some of these photos, the photos we're referencing right now. And I mean, they're very stylized. It's very cool. And yeah, his stuff was great. For the Record, by the way, another one of those great Phoenix bands. These guys were awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just one of those things, Good with Grenades. I knew Eddie from like the For the Record days of Mink Rebellion. Like, we played a lot of shows with those guys. And then, he was just this guy. He had the same look that we were going for. He was just like, fucking like unemployed, liked to drink a lot of beer, and was like, let's just party all the time. We're like, perfect, you're in, hired. And, you know, it was just kind of one of those things, again, coming full circle. We ended up using Tim Harmon on one of our photo shoots. So it was just kind of like this, like, ever evolving, like, you know, when bands like went defunct in Phoenix, there was just like, as you guys mentioned, like this, just almost like charming period of time where a band could fall flat, break up, but then it was just like you were surrounded by a bunch of other guys from the scene, and it just turned out that a lot of great secondary and third bands came out of that, just from, you know, people collaborating with one another after their projects came to an end. So it was definitely a good
Well,
time.
and it's interesting too, like in that same era, like, so Mike was working with all you guys, which is how I got to know you. At the time, I was working a lot with Suburban Noise Records. So I was working with Cottonmouth Kings. I was working with Funk Junkies. I was working with, you know, some other Arizona guys, Funk Junkies and Authority Zero specifically. And, you know, but it was a totally different genre, a totally different world, but it was all happening there in Phoenix too. I mean, Phoenix was one of the biggest markets for Cottonmouth Kings. And so as I toured with different bands and stuff on their record label, I mean, Phoenix became like our second home. Like we loved Phoenix, you know. So by the time it finally came around that I got to work with some of you guys, I mean, I think that's why my impression of Phoenix is just like this music city, you know, and you always think of the LAs or the Nashvilles or the whatever, you know, and something similar happened in San Diego with one of the bands I used to work with, this band Mix Mob. In San Diego, there was all of a sudden 20 great bands that were all kind of, you know, on the grow together and stuff. That was like when POD came out and some of these other bands, Switchfoot and those guys. And so, I mean, these little magic moments kind of, you know, shift around a little bit, but you know, it was a real pleasure being a part of that Phoenix scene. Cause it was just, I don't know, unreal, really cool part of my life.
Well, it's crazy too that you say that. Like that was such like a dividing line in town. Like just for whatever reason, like there was like the clubhouse scene, like those bands, like Cover Up, Think Rebellion, Good with Grenades, like all those types of bands at the time. But then there's like this just like fucking dividing. Like all of a sudden you had like there was like SRH, Club Tattoo, which I think Chester from Lincoln Park like helped found that, and like those two spots, like that was just like such a huge thing for that community with like Cottonmouth Kings and like Head P, like all these bands that started coming
What was that
through.
club? There was
Didn't you go to like a New Year's Eve party with people like with Chester? Like it was something Club Tattoo, and you went to his thing, Ryan? Was that?
Well, I did a bunch of graphic design for Club Tattoo when they were launching. They opened a shop, you know, it was like in the era when all these tattoo shops were getting shows and shops in Vegas and all this stuff. And Club Tattoo opened a shop at the Cosmopolitan in Vegas. And so I did a bunch of graphic design work for them then. And for the Phoenix store, there was a company that I was working with in Phoenix. They were called Arizona Color out in Deer Valley there. And I got the hookup through them. And so I did a bunch of work with them, and I was trying to think of the name of that club. Joe Valenti from or Valentine from Funk Junkies used to be really involved with this club over there, and I was trying to think where we played at, because you're right. I mean, there was sort of that clubhouse side, and my all-time favorite bar name, Neckbeards.
I remember that.
I think they were a little smaller than the clubhouse, but that was one of my favorite sort of Tempe bar names of all time. Well,
we hated that place only because they didn't serve beer.
Yeah, they didn't serve
soda
alcohol.
bar or something.
Yeah, I just love the name Neckbeard for whatever reason. I felt like Neckbeards was a strong name for a club. But yeah, there was that whole group of guys, and then like when we would come through with the Kings and stuff, we would play like the Marquee and places like that. But yeah, there was one other little club right down there. I can't remember what it's called, but we used to do a lot of shows in there. But it was always that SRH crowd, so it was a little bit a different thing.
Yeah, and I think kind of, you know, one of the things just, you know, that happened over the course of time, which I'm glad. It's actually funny that you guys are talking about wanting to open a venue and kind of like relive that moment. I think Nancy in Phoenix, she opened a place called Pub Rock Live in Scottsdale near my house, and it has kind of that similar feel. You know, they're trying to do the same thing as we did back then, and that's actually something that I've been looking to pursue for myself personally. I'm looking for other investors and stuff just to try to open up like a bar / venue to kind of relive those days. But one of the things that happened in Phoenix is a lot of those places were just killed. Like the clubhouse is gone, the Real Bar is gone, Neckbeards is gone, Hollywood Alley, like all of these legendary spots like of that era are gone. So there's not really there's not a ton of places where like bands just can like sort of like form that like underground scene any longer. And there's a few spots like the Nile that's still been kicking forever in Arizona, out in Mesa, but for the most part, a lot of the venues that were like equally as responsible as, you know, the bands and the photographers and everything else that made it all happen, those venues are gone. So it's just kind of sad to see that era come to an end.
Well, on the DL, but not so DL, since we're kind of doing this live, I just invested in a lot of lighting gear to get back into it, and Phoenix might be on my map again. So might see you soon.
Let's talk, man. Let's talk. That's exciting to hear.
Yep. Well, it's been a good conversation with you, man. It's been great to catch up. I want to do it in person soon. So let's plan on that. Where can people find you?
People can find me at the closest bar to my house all the time. I found that I have a huge love for beer, and no, I'm still out and about in Phoenix, Scottsdale to be exact. I'm just kind of, I'm looking, over the past couple of months, I would say I just kind of got a new spark into me. Paul Phoenix and I, when I get back from Detroit, we're going to get back together. Paul Rebellion and I are going to get back into a new little home studio that he built, just kind of bust out some ideas. So some new things to come for sure. And yeah, man, it's been great catching up with both of you guys. It's crazy. I was coming on the Eggs podcast, so I was like, I just need to like prepare for this. I need to get ready. So I woke up this morning. I was like, eggs. I'm going to get some eggs today for breakfast. Opened up the fridge, got some eggs, but instead of eating them, I just decided to go throw them at everybody's houses in my neighborhood just to be a little prick and prepare myself to get on in the air. So,
well, you got to get all rock and roll again. Yeah, you got to get all rock and roll.
Exactly.
So yeah, cool, man.
Like I said, we're all only 20-year-old gentlemen here. So
well, that's
still got
cool.
it in us.
Well, yeah, real pleasure catching up with you, man. I mean, like I said, that period of time for both Mike and I think was pretty impactful. Some of the better moments of our life, and even though they're not the biggest, most mainstream bands and stuff in the world, I mean, like some of the music and things that were being, created in that period of time, it was such a magical period. So I'm grateful to have been a part of it, and grateful to catch up with you and talk about it.
Yeah, man. Thank you guys. All these years later, you guys provided a lot of support, help for us, and we were just trying to, break out of the scene. So it's much love, and it's good to bring everything back full circle here all these years later. So appreciate you guys having me on.
Not a problem. Thanks, bud.
Hi, guys.
Inhibitions fade, a focused moment made. Bruises and bite marks say, takes one to bring the pain. Passion lies in screams of ecstasy dreams. You're in a place for fear, lips are for biting hair. Let's make this moment worthwhile. Let's kill the night and go down in style. Feel the magic rise, we're plotting our demise of perspiration and alcohol as I introduce the bedroom brawl. You bring the ropes and chains, I'll bring the pills and